Imagine standing at the summit of a mountain you have spent years climbing. You have sacrificed your comfort, bled for your ambition, and finally achieved a massive, undeniable victory in your life. You return to your social circle, your friends, your family, your colleagues, expecting them to celebrate your triumph. You expect the champagne to be poured and the genuine smiles to greet you. But as you begin to share your success, the atmospheric pressure in the room subtly drops. There is a slight hesitation before the congratulations. The smiles do not reach their eyes, and instead of lifting you up, they begin to ask you questions. The questions sound innocent at first. They are delivered with a casual, almost breezy tone. But as the conversation progresses, you begin to feel a cold, insidious weight settling into your stomach. You find yourself suddenly defending your achievement. You find yourself downplaying your hard work. You start pointing out the flaws in your own success just to make the people around you feel more comfortable. You walked into the room feeling like a king, and you walk out feeling like an imposter. You have just been subjected to the most covert, venomous form of psychological warfare in human existence: the weaponized interrogation of the envious mind. Envy is the ugliest, most deeply repressed emotion in the human psyche. Society trains us that to be jealous is to be weak, petty, and small. Because admitting to jealousy is a devastating blow to the ego, a jealous person will almost never attack you overtly. Overt attacks reveal their insecurity. Instead, they must disguise their envy as curiosity, as pragmatism, or, most destructively, as concern. They use highly specific, calculated questions designed to poke holes in your reality, bleed your confidence dry, and drag your soaring ambition back down to the swamp of their own mediocrity. This invisible sabotage ends today. To completely immunize your mind against the venom of envy, we must turn to the ultimate master of psychological dissection, Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche understood that human beings are driven by the will to power. When a weak person sees you elevate yourself, their will to power is crushed. They cannot rise to your level, so they are biologically compelled to tear you down to theirs. Nietzsche famously categorized this toxic, seething jealousy as resentment, the driving force of slave morality. The herd hates the exceptional individual, and they use the camouflage of polite society to execute their resentment. Welcome to Depth Psychology. We are going to strip away the polite illusions of social interaction and clinically dissect the 5 specific questions that jealous people always ask. By understanding the dark psychological mechanics behind these questions, you will transition from being a reactive, guilt-ridden victim into a terrifyingly observant, sovereign entity. You will learn to spot the envy, neutralize the interrogation, and protect the sanctity of your inner citadel. Let us decode the language of the envious. Question 1. Aren't you worried about the law of projected fear? The absolute quickest way an envious person will attempt to clip your wings is by introducing a highly specific, terrifying hypothetical scenario disguised as an act of loving concern. The trap you fall into is your own assumption of benevolence. You announce that you are quitting your miserable job to start a company, or that you are moving to a new city to start over. Instead of congratulating your courage, the envious person leans in, furrows their brow to mimic deep empathy, and says, "Wow, that's so brave. But aren't you terrified of the economy right now? What if you run out of money in 6 months? Aren't you worried you are making a massive mistake?" The trap springs when your nervous system registers their words. Because they are framing their sabotage as concern for your well-being, you feel obligated to answer them seriously. You begin to entertain their nightmare scenarios. The dopamine of your ambition is instantly replaced by the cortisol of anxiety. You start defending your business plan to them, and in doing so, you validate the premise that you are standing on the edge of a cliff. The psychological mechanic at play is the weaponization of projected cowardice. Nietzsche understood that the herd is entirely governed by fear. They choose the safe, miserable, predictable path because they are absolutely terrified of the unknown. When you take a massive leap into the unknown, you are violating the fundamental rule of the herd. Your courage acts as a blinding mirror to their cowardice. If you succeed, it proves that their decision to play it safe was not a smart choice, but an act of profound fear. To protect their fragile ego from this realization, they must ensure you fail. And the easiest way to make you fail is to infect your mind with their own paralysis. They ask you what you are worried about because they are desperately trying to download their own anxiety into your operating system. They want you to be as terrified as they are, because terrified people do not build empires. The practical application to defeat this is the acknowledge and dismiss protocol. You must instantly recognize their concern as a hostile projection. When they attempt to inject fear into your vision by asking what you are worried about, you do not argue with their hypothetical nightmares. You do not explain your contingency plans. You look at them with a completely unbothered, chillingly confident smile, and you state, "I am completely prepared for the risks, and I am entirely focused on the execution. Thank you for your concern," and then you abruptly change the subject. You do not grant their fear a single inch of psychological real estate. By starving their anxiety of validation, you force them to sit alone with their own cowardice while you continue your ascent unimpeded. Question 2. Who helped you get that? Or how did you get so lucky? The law of externalized attribution. They will immediately attempt to sever your connection to your own victory by desperately searching for an external factor, luck, privilege, or outside assistance to attribute your success to. The trap is your deeply conditioned desire to appear modest and humble. You land a massive promotion, you get your body into elite physical shape, or you close a monumental deal. When they ask you, "Wow, how did you get so lucky?" or "Who did you know at that company to pull those strings?" your social conditioning kicks in. You do not want to sound arrogant. You do not want to trigger their insecurity. So, you play along. You say, "Yeah, I was just at the right place at the right time," or "I had a lot of help from the team." You voluntarily hand over the credit for your grueling, solitary hard work. You shrink your own magnitude to make their mediocrity feel comfortable. The psychological mechanic is the preservation of the ego through the theft of agency. In the dark economy of human envy, your competence is a direct threat. If you achieved something extraordinary through sheer, unyielding discipline, relentless focus, and superior intellect, it proves that the envious person could also achieve greatness if they simply put in the work. Because they are lazy, they absolutely refuse to put in the work. Therefore, their psyche must invent a narrative where your success has absolutely nothing to do with your effort. They must attribute your victory to luck, to a rich uncle, to a flawed system, or to pure coincidence. If your success is an accident, then their failure is also an accident, which absolves them of all personal responsibility. When they ask you how you got so lucky, they are not asking for a roadmap to success. They are begging you to confirm that your victory was a fluke so they can go back to sleep. The practical application is unapologetic ownership. You must permanently eradicate the word luck from your vocabulary when discussing your achievements. When an envious person attempts to attribute your victory to a random roll of the dice, you must politely, but firmly, correct the historical record. Look them directly in the eyes and say, "Luck had absolutely nothing to do with it. It was the result of 2 years of obsessive focus, relentless execution, and refusing to quit when it got difficult." Do not break eye contact. Let the raw, unvarnished truth of your discipline hang in the air. You do not need to be aggressive. But you must be immovable. By forcing them to acknowledge your agency, you shatter their comforting illusion and claim absolute sovereignty over your own empire. Question 3. Are you sure you're qualified for that? The law of the artificial ceiling. They will attempt to enforce the boundaries of the herd by challenging your credentials, your background, or your inherent right to occupy a space of higher status. The trap is the illusion of the gatekeeper. You decide you are going to write a book, start a podcast, run for local office, or launch a creative project. You share this vision with your circle. The envious individual will immediately narrow their eyes and ask, "Are you sure you're ready for that? Do you even have a degree in that field? Aren't there already experts who do that?" The trap springs when you accept their premise that you need permission to act. Your imposter syndrome flares up. You begin to mentally list the reasons why you might not be good enough. You start researching certifications, reading more books, and endlessly preparing instead of executing, paralyzed by the artificial ceiling they just built over your head. The psychological mechanic is the desperation of the hierarchy. Nietzsche observed that the masses are obsessed with titles, rules, and established boundaries. The herd finds immense comfort in knowing exactly where everyone belongs in the social strata. When you declare that you are going to step out of your designated box and assume a position of authority or creation, you throw the hierarchy into chaos. The envious person views life as a rigidly controlled system. They believe that status must be granted by an external authority. When you attempt to simply take power through your own will, it terrifies them. They ask if you are qualified because they are frantically trying to act as the gatekeeper of a gate that does not actually exist. They want to bind you with the same invisible chains of bureaucracy and self-doubt that keep them imprisoned. The practical application is the strategy of silent execution. The sovereign individual recognizes that in the modern world, permission is a myth. You do not need a piece of paper, the blessing of an institution, or the approval of your peers to build your reality. When the envious person challenges your qualifications, you do not debate your resume with them. You do not attempt to prove your worth to someone who is committed to misunderstanding you. You look at them with mild amusement and say, "I am more than capable of handling it." And then, you simply do it. You put your work into the marketplace. You let the objective quality of your output be the only credential you ever present. You demonstrate that you do not answer to their artificial ceiling. You operate in a completely different atmosphere. Question 4. It must be nice to have, but what about? The law of the diminished victory. They will acknowledge your success for a fleeting microsecond, only to immediately redirect the spotlight onto a completely unrelated negative factor, a past failure, or a global tragedy to ensure you cannot enjoy your high state. The trap is your biological reflex to defend your joy. You buy your dream house, and you show them a picture. They say, "Wow, it must be nice to have a house like that, but the property taxes in that area are going to completely ruin your budget," aren't they? Or you celebrate a massive financial milestone, and they say, "Must be nice to have so much money while the rest of the world is starving." The trap is that you instantly feel guilty for your own success. You feel the need to justify your happiness. You start explaining how much you saved for the taxes, or how much money you donate to charity. You spend the rest of the conversation apologizing for the fact that you are winning. The psychological mechanic is the weaponization of resentment. This is the absolute core of Nietzsche's diagnosis of the toxic mind. A person consumed by resentment cannot experience joy, so they must destroy the joy of others. When you are in a state of high emotional elevation, it physically pains them. They cannot bring themselves up to your level, so they must use emotional gravity to pull you down. By introducing a completely unrelated negative element, a looming tax bill, a past mistake, or a societal crisis, they are throwing a psychological smoke bomb into the room. They are forcing your brain to switch from the high-frequency state of gratitude to the low-frequency state of defense, anxiety, or guilt. They are polluting your clean water with their toxic ink, ensuring that you cannot savor the victory that they have been denied. The practical application is the blank stare of indifference. You must realize that you are under no moral obligation to feel guilty for your own excellence. When an envious person attempts to diminish your victory by introducing a negative pivot, you must refuse to engage with the pivot. Do not defend your budget. Do not justify your happiness. Do not apologize for your success. You look at them, let a heavy, awkward silence fall over the conversation, and you say, "I am incredibly happy with my decision." You do not offer another word. You force them to sit in the awkward, miserable reality of their own negativity. You build a psychological wall around your joy, and you refuse to let their venom cross the perimeter. Question 5. Don't you think you've changed lately? The law of demanding regression. When you begin to elevate your standards, optimize your life, and outgrow the toxic habits of your past, they will accuse you of fundamentally changing, framing your positive evolution as a betrayal of your authentic self. The trap is your desperate desire for tribal loyalty. You decide to stop drinking every weekend. You start waking up early to train. You stop participating in the endless toxic gossip at the office. You are building an undeniable, formidable version of yourself. But your old friends, the ones who are still trapped in those destructive cycles, pull you aside. They look at you with sorrowful, disappointed eyes and ask, "What happened to you? You used to be so fun. Don't you think you've changed lately? You're acting like you're better than us now." The trap springs when your profound sense of loyalty is weaponized against you. You feel a massive wave of guilt. You do not want to be a bad friend. You do not want to seem arrogant. So, what do? You skip the gym. You take the drink. You engage in the gossip. You actively regress your own evolution to prove your loyalty to a tribe that is committed to sinking. The psychological mechanic is the panic of abandonment and the enforcement of the lowest common denominator. The herd survives through absolute conformity. If everyone in the group is overweight, broke, and complaining about their lives, they feel a deep, comforting solidarity in their shared misery. When you break the pattern, when you begin to execute discipline and move toward power, you shatter the illusion that change is impossible. Your evolution is a terrifying threat to their stagnation. When they accuse you of changing, they are not mourning the loss of your authentic self. They are mourning the loss of their comfortable mirror. They are terrified that you are going to leave them behind, exposing their laziness to the light of day. They frame your growth as a betrayal because they are frantically trying to use guilt as a leash to drag you back into the pen. The practical application is the Embrace the Evolution Declaration. You must accept a terrifying, liberating truth: you are better than your past self, and if that means you are outgrowing your current environment, so be it. The sovereign individual does not apologize for growth. When they accuse you of changing, you do not deny it. You do not shrink to comfort them. You look them in the eye and you say, "Yes, I have changed completely. I am elevating my standards, and I have zero intention of going back." You must sever the emotional cord of their guilt trip. A genuine friend will watch you ascend, applaud your effort, and ask you to throw down a rope. A jealous person will grab your ankles and try to pull you back into the dirt. You must be ruthlessly, unapologetically willing to let go of anyone who requires you to be weak in order for them to feel safe. You have been operating under the naive delusion that the people in your life genuinely want to see you reach the absolute pinnacle of your potential. You now possess the chilling, Nietzschean clarity to see the truth. The world does not want you to be a master. The world wants you to remain a harmless, predictable component of the herd. When they ask you what you are worried about, you recognize the law of projected fear, and you dismiss their cowardice. When they ask how you got so lucky, you recognize the law of externalized attribution, and you claim unapologetic ownership of your discipline. When they ask if you are qualified, you recognize the law of the artificial ceiling, and you bypass their imaginary gate through silent execution. When they attempt to diminish your victory with a negative pivot, you recognize the weaponization of resentment, and you freeze them out with the blank stare of indifference. And when they accuse you of changing, you recognize the demand for regression, and you embrace your evolution, leaving their stagnation entirely behind. This level of psychological observation is inherently isolating. When you begin to recognize the subtle, venomous markers of envy in the people closest to you, your social circle will inevitably shrink. You will realize how many of your relationships were built entirely on a foundation of shared misery and mutual mediocrity. Let the circle shrink. The inner citadel is not designed to house the masses. It is a fortress built for sovereignty, for depth, and for the unrelenting pursuit of power over oneself. Do not negotiate with envy. Do not lower your frequency to harmonize with static. The discomfort they feel in the presence of your excellence is not your problem to solve. It is their cross to bear. You must protect your ambition, your victories, and your energy with the ruthlessness of an apex predator. Let the herd whisper. Let the envious ask their pathetic, loaded questions. You will not answer them with words. You will answer them with the terrifying, undeniable physical reality of your continued ascent. If you are ready to stop shrinking to fit into rooms you have outgrown, if you are ready to dismantle the weak, envious programming of society, and if you are ready to forge a terrifyingly powerful, sovereign mind, you are in exactly the right place. Subscribe to Depth Psychology right now. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. We are exposing the darkest, most brutal realities of human behavior and handing you the exact tools to dominate your reality. Leave a comment below with the word elevate if you made it to the absolute end of this video, and tell me which of these 5 jealous questions you are never going to tolerate again. Guard your citadel, master your mind, and I will see you in the next one.